Well, there's two parts to this. The first one is the nature of war doesn't change. So it is visceral, people get killed, and often it is close combat, which we see in Ukraine in the urban cities. The character of war does change. So in 1982 we had the land, the sea and the air domains. Now they add cyber and space to that. So we're 5 domains of war. But we are seeing that the primacy of all this is that man doesn't live in the sea, he doesn't live in the air, he lives on the land. And if you're going to be decisive and take territory, the geography which matters to people, you can only do that with bayonets on the ground.
And that hasn't changed?
That hasn't changed, and that's what we did. You can't cyber your way out of warfare.
What has changed, it seems to me, looking, and particularly at what's happening in Ukraine, is the tank, which has been this incredibly powerful weapon since it was rolled out at the Battle of Cambrai in 1917. Suddenly a tank in Ukraine is looking to be a rather weaker weapon, isn't it?
I think it's too premature to say that, and I think I say that from the perspective that, like all these things, we talk about an all-arms battle. And the all-arms battle is that you need tanks in conjunction with infantry, with air defence, with your engineers, and if you haven't got those, you cannot move. That is why, for example, the Galahad, when it was hit along with the Tristan at Fitzroy, the air defence was not on the ground operating. If it had been there, we wouldn't have had those casualties. So if you're not operating together, and if you've got a vulnerability across all those parts of infantry, armour, engineers, artillery, you're going to be vulnerable. That's why you need a balanced force, and if you don't, you're going to be caught out. That's why the Russians, in terms of their tanks, were caught out. They had very, very few dismounts, and that's why they're struggling to take ground, because their tanks have been vulnerable to the anti-tank systems which we've provided for them, along with the Americans, the Swedes and many other nations.
Have we learned from the Falklands, from Iraq, Afghanistan?
It depends what level you talk about. Have we learnt strategic lessons? Well, of course, the Chilcot report in 2016 would be something that you would look at from Iraq and say that's your template for the future in terms of the strategic decisions you need to take. At the tactical level, I would argue that the training for the soldiers at whatever arm they're in is still really, really good, and you've got a motivated force. The level in between, which is the operational level, our generalship, whether that's good or bad, I don't know, because since the Falklands, of course, we've only really been a bit part player, and I mean that in the sense that we will only probably ever be part of a coalition. There'll be very, very few operations like the Falklands where we will go by ourselves.
When you went to the Falklands, there were 160,000 soldiers in the British Army. It's now 80,000. Do you agree with Lord West that we've cut too far?
Yeah, I think we have. So you would always say that from the Army's perspective, that the Army is always with a volunteer force which is very, very expensive, that they're always too big in peacetime and too small in war. They're actually too small in peacetime and too small in a future war now.